Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Applying for Ohio Volkswagen Funds, the 2023 application cycle. For those of you who may not be familiar with Microsoft Teams live events, if you see the Q&A icon at the top right area of your screen, you can use that area to type in any questions or comments you have as we go through today's informational session. You can also use that to let us know if you're experiencing any type of technical difficulties. The questions will be responded to at the end of Carolyn's informational session. And as you have questions, feel free to comment there. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Carolyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie, and welcome everyone. We're happy you could join us this morning. This is our second webinar for prospective applicants for this year's what we call the Volkswagen Grant Cycle or the Ohio Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund Grant Cycle. My co-presenter today is Mohammed Mereb, and just a practical division of labor. If you have money questions, you are welcome to email me and I will be happy to help. If you have engine questions or diesel emission quantifier, estimating emissions questions, please email Mohammed. We try to be like the Borg here in that we share information back and forth, and we'll try to get your question to the best person to answer it. So those are the links to reach us and the link for the website where all of this fine information is posted. The slides from today's session are already posted. We have written up the questions and answers from last week's webinar, and we will add the questions and answers from today's, and we will have the Q&A document posted on the website, I would think later this week. And then we try to update that about every 2 weeks during the grant cycle while the grant cycle is open, so that everybody has the advantage of seeing what the answers were to any questions that we receive. So you can email questions to us throughout the grant cycle. We will try to figure those out and get back to you and then add them to the Q&A as well. So for today's presentation, we call this the DMTF program, but it's also the VW program. You can use either of those acronyms to search, and you will find it on Ohio EPA's website. This grant cycle, we are doing funds to replace or repower diesel school buses and non-road equipment. So specifically, we have about $7 million available for projects in 26 eligible Ohio counties. $3 million is earmarked for electric school buses, and the remaining funds, about $4 million, are for 3 different categories of non-road equipment. That is port cargo handling equipment, which also includes things like terminal tractors and distribution centers, airport ground support equipment. Those categories must be replaced with all electric. And then switcher locomotives are the only category where you have options for fuel for CNG or all electric gensets, whatever. But the other categories are all electric. Grant requests need to be between $50,000 and $2 million. If you have a project, particularly like a switcher project that is going to be more expensive than $2 million, please give me a call and we will talk through how to handle that. You have a very small project that's less than $50,000. We encourage you to combine forces with some other small projects to submit a joint application to get those covered. There are some caps on per project amounts in the various categories, and that will be clear in the application guidelines. So the timeline for this cycle, we opened the cycle last week on June 5th. We had our first webinar last Tuesday, and today is the second one. This is the same content as last week's webinar, so you don't need to sit through both, though there may be some new questions at the end of this one. The Q&A, as I said, will be posted regularly to the website. Please note the application deadline is not 5 p.m., it's not 4 p.m., it is 3 p.m. on Friday, August the 11th, 2023. If you try to submit at 4:35, the system will be closed and will not allow you to do that. We promise that we will announce grant awards sometime in November of 2023. Depending on how many applications we receive, we may be able to announce awards sooner than that. So for today's presentation, just a few brief slides about the program priorities, how it's funded, what we're hoping to accomplish. Then I'll focus more on some of the lessons we learned and changes from our previous grant application cycles, some things to be aware of for all applicants in all categories, then some specific suggestions by category, and then we will walk through some slides on how to use the online application software. So just big picture background, this program is funded from the Volkswagen settlement, which is a federal court settlement overseen by the federal courts. US EPA and California sued Volkswagen and their associated companies, alleging that VW installed defeat devices on certain diesel vehicles that were sold in this country, and that those devices, it was a software that allowed the emissions to appear compliant with the law when actually they were turning off the emission controls on those vehicles when they were out on the road operating in blatant violation of the Clean Air Act. And those vehicles were emitting between 9 and 40 times the amount of allowable nitrogen oxides, which is a harmful air pollutant, contributes to problems for people with asthma, for young children, for elderly, a lot of people. So this was definitely some harm that was being done. There was a $14 billion with a B dollar court settlement, which is now overseen. Of that, $10 billion went to the vehicle owners to have their vehicles repaired or replaced. $2 billion is given to a Volkswagen subsidiary called Electrify America, and they are installing electric vehicle charging stations along major highways. In Ohio, they've installed chargers along the Ohio Turnpike, along I-70, and some other locations in the state. The remaining $2.7 billion was divided among the 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the tribes. So each state's share was based on how many of the vehicles were registered with the defeat devices in each state. Ohio's share was 75 million. That is the 10th largest of the 50 states, because we had more than 16,000 of those illegal vehicles illegally polluting our skies. And so the 75 million has to be spent by the recipient states within 15 years. There are some incentives if we get it all spent within 10 years to make us eligible for some additional funding. So we definitely want to be in line for that. So to do that, we had to develop a beneficiary mitigation plan explaining how we were going to allocate the funds among the 10 allowable uses based on public comments. We submitted that to the trustee in 2018, and the very tight requirement on these funds, they must be used to impact air quality in areas that bear a disproportionate share of the air pollution burden. So these funds cannot be squandered for other kinds of uses. We had a lot of people with a lot of ideas, but these are strictly to be spent for offsetting the pollution that was generated illegally. And it has to be spent in the transportation sector. So states were directed to balance all of these things in writing their plans. And so we had to consider, where were the defeat device vehicles registered? Our most important, obviously, as always, air quality. We're trying to fund projects in areas where reducing emissions will do the most good in terms of public health. What are the non-allowable uses of the funding? What is the most cost effective? Were there categories like airport ground support that we were not funding in our other funding programs? So that was a welcome new addition. And then obviously we went through 2 rounds of public comment and considered very carefully what the public told us. So we developed a map of where to spend the funds. We allocated our funds as followed: about 53% to on-road vehicles, with funding about 15 million for school buses, 15 million for transit buses, and about 10 million in the heavy-duty truck category. Ferries and tugs, 2 million, switcher locomotives, 5 million, and then the remaining 12 million for airport and port cargo handling equipment. And then each state was allowed to spend up to 15% of its allocation to install charging stations for public electric vehicles, vehicles that are traveling on the public highways. And so we allocated 15% of our settlement was 11 million, and we awarded those funds in 2021 and 2022. And those stations are either already operating or currently under construction. So this is our beneficiary mitigation plan. In April 2018, US EPA redesignated some of the 15 counties as non-attainment for federal air quality under the for ozone under the Clean Air Act. So some counties that were first priority to receive funding in the early rounds of the VW program are no longer first priority for the happy reason that their air quality is currently in attainment with federal standards. So you'll see some changes to that map from previous cycles. So some notes for this year. One of the big changes software-wise, Ohio EPA changed the name of our customer support center. It's now called the Resource Hub. So all of the application guidelines and downloadable attachments are posted on the program website. This link has not changed, but the application form is available in the Resource Hub at that. So that link should still work, but it may not, and you want to be very careful because your old links from some previous grant cycles may no longer work. The link to the Resource Hub is on that blue bar at the bottom of every Ohio EPA webpage, so you will be able to find it. So the most common mistakes we have seen applicants make in the previous rounds of funding, the biggest and most common one was not giving us enough information in the narrative text box sections in the scope description. So for example, we ask you to explain how your vehicle, if it's an on-road vehicle, is going to be operating within 75% of the time or more within the eligible counties. We would get a very simple sentence from a multi-state trucking fleet. All our vehicles operate within a 150-mile radius of city X. Well, that's not even remotely eligible or responsive to what the application is asking for. Take some time, provide some detail in those text boxes. We had a lot of problems with the applicants not getting the right engine conformity certificates for the new engines or vehicles they wanted. We're not requiring that anymore from anybody except switcher locomotives that are other than electric. And I'll mention that more when we get to that process. But nobody else has to worry about these. Switchers that are going to all electric don't have to worry about these anymore. A very common mistake was procrastination. If you wait until the last days to start an application, we've tried to make the application software simple and easy to use, and people have given us good feedback on that, but you still have to pull some information together. That takes some time. And if you get to the very last days before that deadline on August the 11th, you may find with a lot of users in the system at once, it may slow down a little bit. So please be sure you start early. You will have fewer gray hairs at the conclusion of the process. So scope description, those text boxes, we want you to explain the method by which the old engine is going to be decommissioned. All of these federal grant programs and this settlement of a federal court case are giving out funds. It's not that we want to just give away money to renew everybody's fleets and let you buy shiny new vehicles and equipment. We want to reduce emissions. And the only way to do that is to take an old vehicle off the road and out of service. And to ensure that that happens, that they're not being sold to developing countries where they will go pollute somebody else's air for somebody else's children to breathe, we have to verify that the engines are being decommissioned, taking a vehicle fully out of service. Now, you can get scrap value for it. You can strip everything off that you want, but the engine has to be decommissioned. The requirement for most is a 3-inch hole drilled into the engine block, and for on-road vehicles, splitting the chassis rails. We need to understand, we need to hear from you that you understand that there is a 3-inch hole requirement. Or if you're planning to use a salvager that will crush or shred your old vehicle, that is allowed. We have a slightly different form for you to use if you're using shredding and compaction. But we need you to explain to us the method by which you plan to destroy the old vehicles. And then what is the method that you're using to ensure that the equipment, if it's on-road equipment, is going to be operating at least 75% of the time in our eligible counties? Are you going to make sure that the new equipment is being maintained properly? You have to keep that working for at least 5 years. Are you going to train your staff? Have they worked with electric equipment before? And then how are you going to charge that equipment? So we're looking for detail in those text boxes, and I'll come back to that as we go through. Equipment owners may request up to 75% of all electric replacement costs. There are some slightly lower percent caps on other fueled switcher locomotives. Everybody else is on electric. That's the most you can request in grant funds, and we understand you want to get as much money as possible. But if, for example, you are requesting funds for electric school buses, and if everybody's asking for 75%, you can improve the competitiveness of your application if you decide to only ask for 60%, for example. You may have a more cost-effective proposal. We are ranking proposals based on cost effectiveness per dollar of grant funding invested, and that is the effectiveness at reducing emissions. So you have the ability to control your ask up to 75% for some of these. More lessons learned. Non-road equipment, if it is operating less than 1,000 hours per year, we've just excluded it. It will not score well enough to be funded. Even in previous years when we tried with some, it's got to be operating at least 1,000 hours per year. Similarly, we are not going to be able to replace spare school buses that have been sitting idle on your lots and operating less than 5,000 miles a year. We have to be able to show that we are taking an existing vehicle out of service and getting those emissions replaced by a newer, lower emission vehicle. Engine conformity certificates, nobody needs to worry about this unless you are going for a new switcher that is something other than all electric. And if you are, you have to request this from US EPA or California. We can help you do that if you need it. Ask for it early because they can't turn that request around in 2 days' time. Nobody with all electric switchers or anything else needs a conformity certificate. We stopped requiring grant applicants to submit a scrap value quote because the scrap dealers really don't like providing those. But be aware, please understand the scrap value you receive must be documented when you request reimbursement and the closing report, and we will deduct that amount from the grant payment. And we understand that you may be paying a salvage dealer to decommission and scrap your bus or equipment, and that what you are paying them may exceed any scrap value you receive for the metal. So please keep receipts for what you paid and what you received to show us when you request reimbursement. We do not allow leasing in this grant program. It was a nightmare. We have the difficulty of meeting engine decommissioning requirements with a third-party owner, and the projects were taking too long and not meeting some of our federal grant requirements. We just are not able to handle leases. You can request a pre-review of your application. So we ask you to get as much of your application entered into the software as possible. It will give you an opportunity to create a PDF, which you can then save onto your computer, and you can email that to us, and we will be glad to look at that and give you any comments on it. You have to do that before you get to the part of the application which asks you to submit. If you hit submit, your application is locked and you won't be able to make any more changes. So generate that PDF before you get to the submit, save it, email it to either Mohammed or I. We would ask respectfully that you get us those pre-review requests no later than August the 4th. Just because we get really, really busy in that last week helping applicants. We want to give ourselves time to give you comments, and we want to make sure you have time to respond to those comments. After you've made changes to your application, you can then generate and save a new PDF later as the final as submitted version. If your application was not successful in a previous year, you will have to fill out a new online application. Be sure to update your attachments, particularly your quote. If it's more than 6 months old, you need to get a new quote to upload those attachments. And prices are changing, and we get that. That's why we want a current quote. You still have to answer all of the question prompts in the new application. If you received a grant from this program previously, or even if you still have a grant open, we are allowing you to go ahead and apply this cycle as well. We will consider how much funding an applicant has already received and your past performance on any Ohio EPA grants before we award you a new one. But you are entitled and welcome to apply, even if your current project is still in the works and still in the process of being completed. The fleet data spreadsheet is the only attachment that you should upload as something other than a PDF. And I'll show you a picture in a minute to see the correct tab to fill out, depending on the type of project you're doing. You're going to enter the information for the old equipment or old vehicle on the left and the new equipment on the right. And you will upload that as an Excel file attachment to your application, not a PDF. The reason we need it as an Excel file is because we use that to enter data directly into US EPA's diesel emissions quantifier. So if you upload it as a PDF, we will hunt you down. And if we can't find you, your application could be disqualified. Don't make that mistake. That's an easy one. So here's what the fleet data spreadsheet looks like. The left-hand side, which is not shaded gray, is where you put in the information about the existing school bus, for example, where you have the make, the model year, the engine fuel type, which should be diesel, the engine horsepower, the vehicle GVWR in pounds, the VIN number for the old vehicle, all of that in here, estimated annual miles driven, estimated gallons of fuel consumed. All of these are things we need to estimate emissions. And then on the right side, you would enter the information for the new ones you hope to be purchasing based on your quote. What kind of equipment are you proposing to purchase? Obviously, you won't have a VIN yet for the new vehicles. That will come later after you are awarded a grant. Please be sure and fill out the applicant name at the top and the contact name. And then here at the bottom where the blue arrow is, you see there's a tab for on-road vehicles. So that's where electric school bus requests would go. There's a tab for GSE, that's airport ground support equipment, ports and cargo handling equipment. That would go on that one. We're not doing any marine projects this cycle. And then the fourth tab is for switcher locomotives. If you are not a government entity, and public school districts, you are a government entity. If you are a nonprofit or a for-profit entity, you may apply, but you have to demonstrate your credit worthiness. We need to understand that you can cover the upfront cost of the entire project while you are awaiting reimbursement from the grant. So we don't pay anything upfront. We have to see documentation. Before we will pay you a reimbursement, we're going to need to see invoices and proof of payment. So in the grant application, we want you to document that you have an acceptable credit rating, and those are examples of the ones that we're looking for, or provide a letter from a financial institution documenting that you have a line of credit or time deposits that are adequate to cover the cost. So you need to have your financial institution be specific enough that you have a six-figure line of credit, whatever, based on how they handle your accounts. Someone asked us, can I just show you that I've had a healthy cash balance the last few years? And the answer to that is no. We don't want your bank statements, and you really shouldn't want to provide your bank statements to us because anything you provide to us becomes a public record. And that's why we insist on either a letter of credit or an acceptable credit rating. If you have questions about that, you can talk to us as you're working on the application. And that letter from a financial institution has to be one, it can be a bank, a credit union, or a savings and loan, but it has to be one whose operations are regulated and examined by a federal or state agency in the United States. So, sorry, the Bank of the Cayman Islands is not eligible. So in each grant cycle, how do we decide what to fund? We will rank applications by cost effectiveness, the most emission reduction we can get per grant dollar invested, overall and within each category. So for example, Ohio EPA would select the highest ranking cargo handling equipment projects and the highest ranking airport GSE projects and the highest ranking switcher locomotive projects from all the applications received until the available funds in those categories are used up. We do consider sector and geographic balance in making awards as we look at what we're recommending to the director to approve. If you are considering applying and you're not sure if you should, we would encourage you, please do apply. We do have some other funding available from US EPA's DEER grants and some other sources. And often what we do is we apply our available other funding to unfunded applicants from this program, applicants that we may not be able to fund this cycle, but they still score well. So don't hesitate to contact us with project ideas and don't hesitate to apply, because even if we can't fund you with this, we may have some other funding that we will talk to you about if your project scores really well. We are not requiring you to estimate the emissions for your project. We will do that, and we use the fleet data in spreadsheet in the grant application. That's how we estimate cost effectiveness at reducing NOx emissions. And you can run the deck for yourself to get an idea of where your project stands, but we're going to be making the award based on our estimates, just in case you're making some rosy assumptions that we don't necessarily agree with. If we use our own estimates, everybody is being measured with the same yardstick. And if you've never used the deck before, let me just back up there. That diesel emission quantifier tool is a very simple input-output. What they do is here's the old engine data, here's the new engine data, miles traveled, and it plugs and chugs and gives you an estimate. If you've never used it, there's a very good tutorial on the DEC webpage that you can walk through and get a pretty good understanding of it. Even I can run the DEC. So if I can do it, I am sure you can do it, but they're pretty good at helping you walk through it and how to do it. But we will be using our estimates to make funding decisions. One thing to be aware of is that DEC estimates may vary for very similar projects, because the age of the old vehicle or equipment you're replacing, the annual operating hours, amount of fuel used, or idling hours, that will all affect how much emission reduction we're likely to get. So one airport may propose to buy 5 new aircraft tow tractors, and their proposal may be a lot more cost effective than another airport who is proposing to buy 5 of the exact same model tractors at the same price, because the first airport is replacing older equipment that operates more hours. So it's the same thing with school buses and other technology. So this is our map of eligible counties this time. They are the same 26 eligible counties the program has had from the beginning, but the map has been updated to reflect the counties in central and southwest Ohio that have returned to attainment of federal air quality standards. So our first priority counties are those yellow ones. All of the others are second priority counties. Please apply even if you are in a second priority county. In every grant cycle so far, we have always been able to fund some applications from the second priority county. So don't let that deter you. We may not have a lot of applications in some of these categories. So please keep that in mind and apply. And also, we may have other funding that we can direct you to. So we would not discourage anyone from applying this grant cycle. You have to do competitive purchasing. We do not necessarily require you to go out for bids, but we do require you to provide a quote from a vendor to submit with your application. Once you get the go-ahead from us, you may end up with a bid process or another purchasing process that ends up with a different vendor than the one that you got a quote from for the application. That's okay. We just have to approve any different equipment before you purchase it if you are awarded a grant. You are required to use whatever purchasing process applies to you under state procurement laws. So government entities, school districts, you may have a trigger that any purchase over a certain dollar amount, you have to go out for bids or not. We do recognize state term contracts or other competitive purchasing agreements. If you have a question about whether a competitive purchasing agreement that's going to expire at a certain date, you can call me with those and I'll be happy to work through those with you. If you are a consultant who is preparing grant applications for more than one applicant, please be aware you can only work on one application at a time associated with your user email address. So if you're helping 2 or 3 different applicants, you have to finish one and submit it before starting work on another one, or use different user credentials and email addresses for each client, which is usually the easiest way to go. So we just be very much aware of that. You can't have several going at once. Notes by sector: electric school bus funding. When Ohio EPA developed our first VW plan, we earmarked $3 million of the $15 million for a pilot project to test the performance of all electric school buses in Ohio's climate and Ohio's hilly topography. And that was in 2018, electric school buses were not widely available. The 3 big manufacturers in the US of buses were promising that electric buses were coming, but you couldn't just order one at that time from an American manufacturer. There were some available from other manufacturers overseas. Things have changed a lot the last few years. As you know, all 3 of the major US manufacturers and other manufacturers are offering electric buses now. Still takes a while. There are still delays in receiving them sometimes, but they are widely available. And there's a lot more collective experience with the operation of electric school buses. So rather than doing it as a pilot project, as we originally envisioned, we're offering a regular grant application campaign opportunity so that you can apply this cycle. And we are trying to do this. We are doing an amendment to Ohio's VW plan to make sure the trustee understands. We've tried to time this application cycle with our $3 million in order to coordinate and dovetail with a very large amount of federal funding that is now available from US EPA for electric buses. There's quite a bit of funding in some of the federal laws that have passed. And we want to make sure if you are trying to electrify your school bus fleet, you can go for the different sources of funds and leverage one for the other. So if you are a school district and you are applying for both our state VW funds and federal clean school bus grants, we have a deadline of August 11th. We're going to review the electric school bus applications first. And we know that if you are a big fleet applying for US EPA grants, the deadline for that is August 22nd. We're going to do our level best to turn around our reviews so that we can at least notify you that you are a recommended candidate in our process, so that you can say that in your grant application to the feds before you admit it. So you may be applying to them for 15 buses and to us for 3 buses, whatever it is you're doing. It should be something that you can show that this is leveraged funds, leveraged resources to show US EPA that you have a smaller or a more strong application because you're doing bigger and better things. So we will do our best to notify you. We will not have funding decisions by August 22nd, but we should know if you're one of the recommended or not. Now, US EPA will be offering their traditional school bus rebates for electrics this fall also. They've not yet released that, so we don't know what the deadline will be. Most school bus projects that are smaller, you're only doing a few buses. it would be probably much better for you to go for the traditional rebates rather than the grant application. The grant application is designed for bigger fleets. We cannot help you with federal applications. We're not expert on their requirements, but the rebates are a lot easier. The application is easier, and every school district in the country is eligible for the rebates. It's a random number. So everybody applies and they use a random number system to generate who gets funded. And we strongly encourage all Ohio school districts to apply. This is the first time that we've ever funded the chargers for electric vehicles or equipment that we are paying for with the grants. We are only doing that for the electric school buses. We are not doing that for the other categories. This is because of our efforts to dovetail our funding opportunity with US EPA's and make them as similar as possible. So you can request up to 75% of the cost of the charger equipment for one charging station per bus. This does not include installation costs or anything you have to do to upgrade your electric service. There is an overall cap of $375,000 per bus, including the charger. So you would get a quote for the chargers that you need and a quote for the buses you need. And if your bus cost quote is $350,000 and your charger quote for one charger is, let's say, $10,000, then you would upload the two quotes, and that's your total project cost multiplied by the number of buses you're requesting, obviously. So that's how you would do that. One of the big problems that came up in the first round of federal funding for electric school buses was that applicants got very excited and applied for the buses, but really had not thought through their charging needs or had not discussed it with their electric utility or electric service provider. We are forcing you to do that, to have those conversations, because to submit our application, you need to talk to your electric service provider first, and then you will have them sign a form that is on our website and downloadable in the application. It is called the Utility Site Suitability Acknowledgement Form. And you will give them this form and ask them to put it on their letterhead and sign it and give it back to you to submit as an attachment to your application. Now, we have given the electric utilities in the state in all of our meetings about electric school buses, we've given them a heads up. They've seen our form. It shouldn't come as a big surprise, although some of the local service providers might not have seen it yet. But we want to make sure that you are having that initial conversation. We're not expecting a full site survey to be carried out. We're just trying to prompt those initial conversations so you have some idea what you need to do with your electric service before you start purchasing and putting electric school buses into service. One of the biggest problems we've had with grant applications over time is that the person who wrote the grant application wasn't communicating with the transportation supervisor or the fleet manager. And so somebody wrote a grant and 2 or 3 years later, all the vehicles are here, and the fleet supervisor sends all of the vehicles to be scrapped and doesn't get those before and after pictures of the engine being decommissioned, in which case we cannot pay you from the grant for the new buses because you didn't properly decommission the old buses. Be sure, those of you who are writing grant applications, be sure your fleet managers know what the requirements of the grant are. And in Ohio, we have a group of stakeholders who are interested in electric buses in particular, and the Ohio School Boards Association is graciously hosting the calls, monthly calls on that, and a web page for everyone interested. And we have put on that web page links to Ohio experts and contacts for the major utilities in the state. There may be a contact for AEP or Duke Power, for example, that is not who you normally deal with. You can work through who you normally deal with, but we give you some contacts if you're not sure. Okay, moving to switcher locomotives. One question we get is, what's a freight switcher? And what this means is a locomotive that moves rail cars around in a rail yard, usually associated, cited with a port or an intermodal facility or a large manufacturing facility. So they are operating in one place, moving cars around, putting trains together, as opposed to a line haul locomotive that's moving freight long distances. No state is going to use its hard-earned VW dollars to improve emissions from a locomotive that's going to be in Ohio today and 17 states away tomorrow. So that's why these funds are limited to switcher locomotives that are operating in one place so that we can get the emission benefits in one place. And the eligible switchers are operating 1,000 or more hours a year. You have to be a tier 3 or older equipment being replaced. And now we understand that in most cases, you're going to be repowering a locomotive rather than replacing it. So you're going to basically go in and put the new equipment into the shell of the existing locomotive. And those projects take time. They have longer timelines. You can ask for a 36-month timeline rather than a 24-month timeline for your project. And if we end up needing more time down the road, we can approve an extension if needed for good reason. Tom Burns with the Ohio Rail Development Commission is a good source of technical assistance. He's seen a lot of these projects before. So first, airport ground support equipment. You can update either diesel or spark ignition equipment. It has to be equipment operating outdoors, and your only option for the new equipment is all electric. And we know that airports, you also have fuel trucks, plow trucks, drayage trucks, and those are motor vehicles. Those are not eligible this cycle. We're only doing what we call the airport ground support equipment. Moving over to port cargo handling equipment, we will allow funding of terminal tractors operating in distribution centers because the VW trustee has now approved this use in other states. We can do the heavy-duty forklifts with 8,000 pounds or more of lift capacity. We can do terminal tractors. If your terminal tractor is a non-road vehicle, but you happen to have two adjacent terminal yards and you have it street legal, you have it approved to go out and go down the street and operate in your other facility, we can approve that. But in general, we are not looking to do semi-tractors that are out operating road legal. So if you have one that you have to take out of the immediate distribution center to another one, talk to me about it, and we'll be sure and put the details about that in your application guidelines. Okay. So filling out the grant application, let's take a quick look at the software. Please read the directions. You will miss something for sure in your text boxes if you haven't read the directions about what we're looking for. The request for applications, that's what we call the application guidelines. And it is posted on the program website at that link. And these slides are now posted. You can pull those links as well. So the first thing you're going to do is set up an account in the Resource Hub, which is what we used to call the Customer Support Center. So you're dealing with two different web pages. The one at the top on that first bullet there is the program web page. You can go there, you can find the application guidelines, you can find lists of all the other projects we've funded, see what's been funded before. The second one in the second bullet there, that's where you go to find the application itself. And once you have credentials, you set up an account, you have a password, then you can start filling out the actual online application. So you want to bookmark both of those websites. So once you've got your credentials, start gathering information on your existing equipment. What's the make? What's the idling hours? What's the model year? What fuel are you using? And gathering quotes for the new equipment that you want to purchase or the engine repowers that you want to do. So once you've got all that, then you're ready to start filling out the grant application. Please read the directions. When you go to our web page, this is the program web page, that first gray bar you see down at the bottom is the DMTF, Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund, 2023 Request for Applications to replace diesel school buses and off-road equipment. This is this grant cycle. You'll see all the other previous grant cycles in gray bars below it. When you open up this little accordion link, this first one, this is what it'll pull up for you. And there are links to the resource hub where you'll find the form. There are links to today's webinar. The webinar slides are already posted. And as soon as we have written up the Q&A from today and added that to the Q&A from last time, we will have the Q&A posted right here near the big blue first arrow there. And we will continue. We get head scratcher questions throughout the grant cycle. We will post those there for everybody to see. You may contact us by phone or email while the grant cycle is open. I would encourage you to use email to me or to Mohammed. What with teleworking schedules, the best way to reach us is often through email. So the steps you do: create an account. That'll take you to the link where you will set up your credentials and get your password to use the online application form. The instructions to apply is how to use the software. Then that third bullet right there, 2023 Request for Applications. This is the application guidelines. That little PDF is a live link. That is so important. Please pull that up, save it, bookmark it, print it out so you have it next to you as you're working, whatever. The map of the counties, the fleet data spreadsheet, which is that Excel you're going to have to fill out and upload. There is an applicant certification statement. This is where you have whoever is the one responsible for the project, which may be your project director or your district superintendent, whoever's in charge, is going to check a bunch of boxes. Yes, I understand that I have to destroy the old engine. Yes, I promise I will maintain this engine and I won't void the warranty. Several other things. Yes, we don't have a felony here pending or whatever. So any questions about that, they're going to have to check that off and sign it, and you're going to have to upload it. And then for electric school bus projects, there is that form that you will have your electric utility put on their letterhead and sign and give back to you. So all of those are downloadable from either within the application form itself, or it's a lot easier a lot of times, download it from the program website. So you'll have those ready. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to get my cursor back to the right spot here. There we go. So when you go to the resource hub, and that's that blue bar on the bottom of every Ohio EPA webpage, that's where you will go to open, get an account, and get the actual application form to start filling out online. So you're going to go to where it says either log in if you already have credentials or sign up to get a new account. That's where that button is up in the top. Then there is always, you can submit questions and get questions and answers about all the different Ohio EPA grant and funding programs here. And you can search by keyword. You can search by VW or DMTF, which is Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund. You can always search there, and that will pull up published answers. You can filter it, select categories, and find just about anything on Ohio's webpage. I would encourage you to bookmark the instructions to apply. You've got the application guidelines on the program website. You've got the instructions to apply on the Support Center website and Resource Center, and that is how to actually use the application software. So two different things you want to probably print out and have handy if you're old-fashioned like me and you like printed copies of things, or at least have it there ready to pull up. And then once you get in there, there's a button for log in or sign up and another button for submit an application. Once you have credentials, that is what you will click to start an application or come back and work on it after you've been working on it. So realize here, you have to be logged in with credentials to get to the application form. So you'll put in your username, you'll put in your password, and you will log in. Before you log in, if you look at the second blue arrow down here, you'll see and there's a whole drop-down menu of all of Ohio EPA's different grant programs that have software here. We're usually the second bar, that blue bar that says Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund Grant and instructions. If you are not logged in, the instructions link is live and you can get into a never-ending do loop cycle with the instructions, but you can't get to that Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund grant form until you are logged in with credentials. That's because we need to know who you are as you're working on the form. So where that blue arrow is, that will be a live link, Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund grant, once you have logged in with your credentials. That's where you pull up the application cycle. When you open the application, we have these dots we call train stops at the top of each page. Where the first blue arrow is, the second blue arrow says screen 2. So for example, in the narrative section, there may be 6 different screens. You can always tell where you are in each application, and you can use these to navigate around. So if you've been working and you save it for the day and you come back tomorrow to work some more, you can always move around quickly using these. Anytime you make an error in what you're submitting, it will give you text in red just below these train stops to tell you what the problem is or what it's looking for that it doesn't think you've given it yet. And then you'll see, for example, there's a text box there you can type in, and you see there just below the text box where it says 0 of 1,000 maximum characters. All of our text boxes are built to have 1,000 characters. If that is not enough for you, you can always put your answer in a separate file and upload it as a Word document or a PDF to the software. And then at the bottom of each page, there's a back button and a next button. Whenever you leave a page and go to the next page, it will save everything that you have done. But if you're working and you're on one page and you stop to take a phone call or go get coffee and you get in conversations and you don't get back, you may have timed out. And you'll have to go back in, log back in. Everything you will have done will have been saved up to the last page you were working on. So we encourage you, just be aware that it will time you out if you've been, I think it's about 20 minutes. So when you get to the vehicle types, it will ask you, what are you looking for? And you can select, and there will be airport ground support equipment, port cargo handling equipment, switcher locomotives, and school buses will be your vehicle type. And then you will say, do you want to replace it or do you want to repower it? I'm assuming most cargo equipment is going to be replacement. Most school buses are going to be replacement, but you do have a repower option. Switcher locomotives, we're assuming most of them are going to be repowers, but we will consider both replace or repower in all of these categories. Each time you move to the next page, your work will be saved. Now, what is the new fuel type for this line item? It is going to be all electric is the only eligible fuel type for the new school bus, cargo equipment, or GSE. Switchers have other fuel options that you can pick, and then you enter the number of buses or number of pieces of equipment. It will have a drop-down menu. Where is your equipment operating? Obviously, if it's operating in an airport or a rail yard, we assume it's only operating in one. But if you have something that is a school bus, it may be operating in more than one county. The drop-down menu is the 26 eligible counties. It is okay if your school bus operates most of the time in your home county, but it happens to run a few miles into another county on its route or to sports events or field trips. We understand that. What we want you to enter here is the primary county where the bus is domiciled and operates 75% of the time. When you get to the current use text box, that's where we want you to explain to us how the bus operates, where it operates, anything like that. But for here, this is where you're just going to enter the primary county where it is domiciled. Oh, let me back up there just for one moment. Most of the cargo equipment is going to be operating in one place, so you're just going to pick the primary county there. Vehicle operational status. You must certify to us that the vehicle you wish to repower or replace is currently operational. And then what are the eligible years? For the application form will tell you cargo handling equipment, ground support equipment, any model year is eligible for replacement. Switchers must be Tier 3 or older to be eligible. School buses must be model year 2009 and older in order to be eligible for replacement with grant funds. And then, for example, when you get to what is the funding request, how much money are you asking us for? So the first box you're going to fill in, what is your total project cost? And then the second box is how much are you asking us for? And it will calculate the percentage for you. So if you are asking for more than the maximum, which in most categories is 75%, it will stop you and give you some red text explaining what the problem is. So then it will give you this little summary. Your total project was $1,050,000, and the total requested from Ohio EPA was this much. That means that this much is what you have to come up with as a match, and it will give you your percentage. So your funding request summary, it will remind you these are competitive grants, and if you request the full 75%, you're competing with other applicants. You might do yourself a favor to request less than 75% to improve the competitiveness of your application. Then here are your current use. This is where we want details. Don't skimp on details in the text boxes. Like I said, if you need more than 1,000 characters and that little where the blue arrow is, that will be updating as you're typing. You can always add an attachment with more. We are looking for detail about where the bus operates normally. For example, it has a route into neighboring counties, or you use it for sporting events. We want you to explain seasonal operation if you are not using this bus during the summer months. When you get to the text box about how the new vehicle will be used, that's where you'll explain how this might change. For example, will the driver return the bus to the bus garage for charging in the middle of the day, or will you charge overnight only? For cargo handling equipment, GSE, and switchers, we'll be looking for information in these text boxes about the duty cycle. And everybody says, oh, we operate 24/7. Are you really operating 24/7? How many days a week? Are you down at certain times? When you get to the new use box, we will be looking for information about when you normally expect to be down for charging and for how long. And then maintenance. Don't blow off this. You want to make sure you have some detail there. Are your drivers and your mechanics trained to operate and maintain all electric equipment? Is the vendor going to come in and provide a day of training? Are you going to provide refreshers? How are you going to make sure that this is going to be maintained properly? And then if you are applying for an alternate fuel, which is electric, you must include information about fueling or charging stations you will use. We need to see where that's going to be, when you expect to install it, and so forth. You can add as many additional attachments as you want to. The software does not check the contents of your attachments. We live bodies will do that when we review your application. The software only checks whether at least one file has been uploaded. You can combine all of your attachments except the fleet data sheet into a single PDF, or you can upload multiple PDFs, whatever is easier for you. Remember, your fleet data spreadsheet has to be attached as an Excel file, an Excel spreadsheet. So then it will ask you for a signature. The signature is by the person who is writing the grant application for you. So your signature signifies that you are authorized to submit a grant application on behalf of your school district or your company. The signature here is from the grant writer. It does not have to be the CEO. If a grant is awarded, then the contract will have to be signed by the CEO or whoever is authorized to sign contracts for the company. But this signature in the application is just the grant writer, so we can get back in touch with the grant writer if we need to. All right, so work in progress. If you are working on your application and you go away and you come back in a day or two to work on it some more, you can always see all the work you've done, but where do you go to see your attachments? Any attachments that you've uploaded already, if you want to check and be sure you've uploaded everything you need to, where you see your welcome, John Smith, whoever it is, if you click on that account link in the upper right part of the screen, that is where you will be able to pull open what are the attachments you've uploaded, and you can make changes if you need to. And finally, a pop quiz for things that we hope you got. What is the latest time to submit a grant application this cycle? True, false, a school district can apply for all electric buses. True, false, an airport can apply for gasoline or CNG fueled ground support equipment this cycle. And if you were listening, you know that the answers to those. Last day to submit, August 11th, no later than 3 p.m. This cycle, only all electric school buses, and this cycle, only all electric for ground support equipment and for cargo handling equipment. So this is our contact information again. I'm the money lady. Mohammed is the engine guy. We will be happy to answer your questions as best we can. And if it's a good head scratcher question, we will add it to the posted Q&A on the website. And while I get a quick sip of water here, I will ask Loudon, our assistant chief, is standing by with any questions that we've gotten during this. You can still ask questions. Please type them into the Q&A, and we'll answer them here for everybody and include them in the posted Q&A on the website later this week.
Thank you, Carolyn. We will let you get that sip of water. We have a few questions that have come in, and we thank everyone who submitted questions. And as Carolyn said, please keep them coming. We have a question from Juliet. Is the map of the 2023 counties the most up-to-date list of priority counties? You can speak to the map and what priority counties mean.
Yes, the map that is in the application on the website shows that the Northeast Ohio yellow counties are first priority. All of the other of the eligible 26 counties are second priority. Do not let this discourage you from applying. Every grant cycle, we have been able to fund projects in the second priority counties. So please apply.
Thanks, Carolyn. The next question is this the first year that VW grant funding will be given to electric school buses? Were any electric school buses funded last year, meaning in 2022?
No, this is the first year that we are doing electric school buses. We originally did, we had 15 million in the school bus category. We funded 12 million in school buses in earlier grant cycles, 2018, 2019, 2020. And in those cycles, it could have been CNG school bus, propane school bus, or new diesel school bus. We were planning in our plan to earmark 3 million for an electric school bus pilot. We're doing it a little bit differently now because electric school buses are so much more widely available than they were in 2018. This is the first time that we have offered funding for electric school buses, and because there's currently a lot of federal funding available for electric school buses, we have structured this as best we can to try to help applicants who may be applying for both our funding and US EPA federal funding.
Thanks, Carolyn. Next question is, can you speak a little more towards the electric school bus offering? Is there a school bus minimum? Do we have to get one charger per bus? You know, anything more that you can share on the electric school bus offering side?
On that side, the maximum you can request per per bus is 375,000. So up to 75% of the cost of the bus itself, and up to 75% of the cost of one charger per bus. You do not have to request a charger. You can stick to just the buses if that is your preference. We will look at the total amount against each quote to make sure you're not asking for more than 75% of each, the bus and the charger. And then we look to make sure you're not exceeding that $375,000 maximum for the bus itself. You may always ask for less, and that may make your application more competitive with others who may be asking for the full 75%.
Thanks, Carolyn. Last question for now. Can private entities apply for electric school buses?
Not in this grant cycle. Private entities can apply for the federal funding, but because we only had 3 million available, we are really still not, because of the high price of those buses, we're envisioning a small number of small projects this cycle. So this cycle is open only to public school districts in Ohio.
Those are the questions we have, Carolyn. Thank you very much for the presentation and for answering the questions. I want to say a quick thank you to everybody who participated. Thank you to our Ohio EPA staff who helped in the background. We will be posting, as Carolyn mentioned, the slide deck is already on our website. We'll be updating our Q&A document with today's questions and posting that on our website as well. And then if you know, and the recording of the webinar will be posted on our website as well. So if you know someone who would have benefited but could not make it today, please let them know. The best way to find our website is to simply Google Ohio 2023 VW Mitigation Grant Program. Simply Google Ohio 2023 VW Mitigation Grant Program, and this grant offering will come up right away. So with that, I just want to say finally a quick thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.